Oh boy, it's another episode talking about the Avengers, everyone. I used to talk about different things on this channel. Hey everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgy, your guide to all things geeky, and this is Comic Class, the show every single week on this channel where we just geek out about comic books. And as I promised a couple hours ago, we were going to have 2 episodes today talking about the Avengers. We already did our episode talking about Avengers No Surrender. Now it's time to talk about Avengers #1. The brand new Avengers series from Jason Aaron and Ed McGuinness coming out today. And this was an issue that a lot of people were waiting on because the Avengers for a while just really kind of haven't felt like the Avengers. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they have been moving from one thing to another over and over and over and over again. I mean, the Avengers have had many different bases, many different locations, many different members, many different rosters, many different leaders, constantly changing over and over again. And there have been multiple different Avengers teams. Not over the course of the last decade, but no, over the course of like this year and the year before that, it was that same thing all over again. And then the year before that, there were 3 other different teams and they would have completely different lineups. Yeah, man, the Avengers have been very unstable. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Avengers are big names and Marvel has really been trying to promote that, been really trying to figure out how can we get as many Avengers related titles out there as we can. But now they have calmed the fudge down and said, one team. That's it. Just one Avengers team with a small, lean roster. And this is the first issue of that new series. And hey man, you guys know me. I'm a diehard old school Avengers fan. I should be very excited about this. Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I bet you guys thought that I was going to come in here and be all like, well, here's all the problems with it. No, this is actually a very good issue. Now this issue opens up in a very interesting way because it opens up with Thor, Tony Stark, and Steve Rogers all sitting down to have a drink together, and they basically just talk about the Avengers. And the reason why this is so interesting is because it's not them doing the typical, hey, we should get the team back together, because I've seen that many times over the course of my comic book reading lifetime. This time it was different, because this time it was clearly meant to be a metaphor for the writer's room at Marvel. It was clearly meant to be kind of all the writers at Marvel coming together and just having a debate about what the future of the Avengers should be, because you had Captain America in there going, listen, everything's been lost, everything is just too out of control, we need us. We need the main Avengers characters to come back in here, and we need to come in here and kind of set the ship straight. We need to set the course correctly. But then you had Tony Stark in there going, listen man, we had our time. Our time has passed. It's time we kind of walk off into the sunset. I can name you dozens of other people out there who are more qualified to lead the Avengers than us right now. And you can tell that's the debate that's been going on at Marvel over and over and over again of, hey man, should we have these old characters still be our big main stars, or should we get new characters in there? Should we go into the next generation of heroes? And you guys know me. I love legacy characters. I think legacy characters are great ways of celebrating the older characters of the past, but at the same time moving your universe forward. And I've always said, if your universe isn't moving forward, what the heck is the point of telling a story? I love seeing the next generation of heroes come around. However, even though I love legacy characters, and I especially love, like, say, the Jane Foster Thor, I love the Sam Wilson Captain America, I would love to see someone other than Brian Michael Bendis write Riri Williams to see how they would do with that character, because I don't think Bendis can really write young characters anymore. But yeah, I like the idea of there being a new Iron person out there. So yeah, even though I love the idea of the next generation of heroes coming around, and I like many of the characters that they chose to be the next generation of heroes, I didn't like how they were doing it. I liked that Sam Wilson became the next Captain America. I didn't like that Sam Wilson became the next Captain America because Steve Rogers had the super soldier serum sucked out of him by some random villain we had never met before, and then he just became an old man. I love that Jane Foster became the new Thor. I hated that Jane Foster became the new Thor because the old Thor, in a storyline that had nothing to do with him at all, just had a word whispered in his ear, and now he was unworthy to lift his hammer anymore. It's like, no man, if you're gonna send him off into the sunset, send him off into the sunset. Write a whole story based around that idea. Give them that big final farewell that makes you go, that's what that character was all about. Marvel had not been doing that. Instead, they had kind of just been crapping all over the old characters in a very disrespectful way. So even though I love the legacy characters and I wanted them to stick around, I understand people being like, yeah, but they just destroyed that old character. The way that you give us new toys is not by breaking the old toys. And as I said, while the debate of should the old characters come back, should the new characters be here, was raging between Tony and Steve, Thor comes in there and goes, listen, we need this. Me, Thor, you, Tony, you, Steve, we need this. And I was like, that's kind of why I'm okay with these old characters coming back. Even though I like the new characters and I wanted the new characters to stay. Even though I wanted Jane Foster to stick around. Even though I wanted Sam Wilson to stick around. I'm okay with the older characters coming back because of what Thor says in here. Because, yeah man, you kind of really just disrespected the old characters. You did not give them good, proper send-offs. You did not do something that really honored these characters that have been around for generations. You kind of just crapped all over them. Yeah, Thor is right. We need this. We need to redeem ourselves. We need to come in here and go, we're heroes. Yeah, if you are going to send these characters off one day, it needs to be done right, and it was not done right. So yeah, they kind of do need to come back. From there, the story splits away from the three main Avengers and it starts focusing on all the characters who are going to become part of this new Avengers team. You start focusing on Robbie Ray as the new Ghost Rider, and you show him talking about what just happened to him in the Marvel Legacy one-shot that came out a couple months back, about how he suddenly found himself in Africa fighting Starbrand. That's something I should go ahead and point out now. This, in several ways, is basically the continuation of Marvel Legacy, which when I was working in the comic book shop, so many people kept coming up to me going, so when's Marvel Legacy issue number 2 coming out? It's like, that's not what this, it's not happening. No, that's not a thing. But for all the people out there who had been waiting for a Marvel Legacy issue number 2, this is as close as you're going to get. This is where many of the dangling plot threads from that storyline are going to finally start picking up. So you have Robbie Reyes talking about how he had the fight with Starbrand in Africa, then you have Black Panther and Doctor Strange in Africa at the place where the fight happened, and they're in the giant crater that they found at the end of that issue, the one where the giant celestial was buried from the fight that the Avengers in 10,000 BC got into. For anybody who didn't read Marvel Legacy, everything that I just said sounds insane to you, but trust me, it all actually works out. But as I said, you've got Doctor Strange and Black Panther digging deeper into the earth 2 miles below the surface of South Africa to discover what this giant crater was that they uncovered at the end of Marvel Legacy, and they discovered there was something alive here, something's been moving around, we don't know what happened to it. Doctor Strange finds that there were actually magical seals placed here to keep this thing from moving around, and now because all magic was destroyed a couple months back in the Doctor Strange series, this thing is up and running around again, which when I read that, I had that brief moment in which I thought to myself, oh shoot, someone is referencing that story. I love seeing that because whenever Doctor Strange pops up in any other book out there, no one ever talks about that, and it feels like that should be a major thing that people talk about. It's so good to see someone else referencing that storyline, and then I stopped and I realized, oh right, Jason Aaron wrote that storyline and he's writing this. Of course he would reference that. But hey man, at least someone is referencing this major thing that happened to Doctor Strange recently. And from there, we also go and focus on Jennifer Walters, who was just walking through the streets of New York, and she was talking about how she has to keep her rage intact, and she's trying to fight back the Hulk from coming out, which I'm kind of confused on that one, because granted, I'll admit, I dropped off of the most recent She-Hulk series before it ended up wrapping up, but I still tried to flip through it, still tried to keep up with what was going on. But didn't she kind of cure herself there at the end? Did she kind of like come back to normal? Didn't she kind of like regain her old self there at the end of that? I mean, granted, you can't just get rid of anger issues all of a sudden, so I understand if they're still around, but yeah, wasn't it kind of like semi-resolved at the end of that? It kind of feels to me like Jason Aaron started writing this before they decided to wrap everything up at the end of that She-Hulk series, and he had already planned on keeping her as the big gray mean Hulk, but then they wrapped everything up, so they're like, oh shoot, get in touch with the colorist and switch that gray back to green. And then of course the last member of this new Avengers team is Captain Marvel, and we get to see her with Alpha Flight, and they find some giant portal opening in the sky. She goes to investigate, and that's when this story really picks up. So far it's just been introducing us to all these characters, you know, the basic stuff that you have to do when you're starting a brand new Avengers book. But then the story actually starts to kick in, and Carol sees a dead Celestial falling out of the sky, and she has to use all her might to push it from landing in Times Square, and she pushes it into the river, which, man, I love Captain Marvel, and so many people don't write her going at full power, so seeing Captain Marvel push something the size of Times Square away from Manhattan was like, that's how powerful she is. Yes, okay, That's how you do it. So I was happy to see that. But yeah, it's not just one dead celestial falling. They look up in the sky and there's just countless dead celestials falling out of the sky. Everybody who doesn't know, celestials are kind of like the Galactus of Galactus. They are these creatures that basically create all life. They basically birthed the entire universe. They could destroy an entire planet with the snap of their fingers. Yeah, they are massive big deals. And this story ends with just all the celestials falling out of the sky dead. And it makes you go, okay, if these are things that could punt Galactus like a football, what just took out all of them? And at the end of the storyline, we actually get to see what it was that did this, and I won't say what did it, because I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but also because it's a brand new creation, and I have no idea exactly what it means yet. It's very kind of like vague and ominous and, oh, it's coming kind of stuff, which, I mean, that's fine. That's how you do a teaser at the end of an issue. But I will say, since it's a brand new creation, Ed McGuinness had to basically create this new thing. It looks really damn cool, the thing he created. I looked at that and went, yeah, that looks menacing. That looks like something that we should be scared of. And then, of course, at the end of this, the Avengers, they all come together. They yell at Avengers Assemble. It's like, oh, yeah, okay, the Avengers running to do stuff. So, in the end, it's a very simple first issue, but it kind of needed to be. I mean, that's the point of an issue number one, is to be simple enough that brand new readers can jump into the series. This is an incredibly new reader-friendly issue. This is an issue that comes in here and goes, hey, here are each of the members of the team. Here's a little bit of the flavor of each of these members, so you know what they've been going through. Here are the three main members of the Avengers. Here's the reasons why they need to start the Avengers back up again. At the end of this, they start the Avengers back up again. And here's the big threat. Do you not know what the Celestials are? Well, they're really big monster things. We're going to tell you what a big deal they are, and they're all dead, so even if you don't know what the Celestials are, you know that they're a big deal, so if something killed it, you know that the threat has to be an even bigger deal. It's really an easy way to get new readers to understand what's going on. Like, you could actually diagnose, like, page by page, like, oh, okay, this is how you introduce people to this concept. Done, simple, easy. Now, as far as negatives go, I will say this issue does kind of jump all over the place, but it's really hard to write an issue like this that doesn't jump all over the place, because you do have to introduce us to each member of your team. And yeah, it's kind of hard to make that feel like one smooth transition from one page to the next when you have 4 members of your team in New York, but one of those members is not talking to the other 3 members just yet. You have another character out in Los Angeles, 2 other characters in Africa, and another character out in space. Yeah, man, when you have characters that spread out, it is going to jump from one thing to the next constantly all throughout this series. But that's just issue number 1. And even though they had all these characters separated, they were able to still introduce us to each member of this team. And at the end of this, they were able to introduce the threats that every member of this team was going to have to go up against. And we got to see them starting to go up against this threat. So you know that even if they're not all in the same location, they're all united. They are all working together for a common cause. They're all fighting against the same thing at the moment. And you can see how that will lead each of them to join up and being together. In many ways, I have to kind of compare this to the Exile series that came out a few weeks ago. If you guys remember a couple weeks ago when I was talking about Exiles number 1, I was very excited for that issue to come out, and I did praise it a fair amount, but I did come in here and critique it a bit by saying, yeah, it still has to jump from one place to the next so that I can introduce each member of this roster, and I can tell it's gonna kind of be doing that a lot for a while until everything finally calms down. Sure enough, that is kind of what has been happening in that book. And it does really create this feeling of, all right, now we gotta go with this thing. Now we gotta go with this thing. Now we gotta go with this thing. This issue, even though every single member of this team is not united yet, it's able to introduce us to each member of this team all in the first issue, and is able to give every single member of this team something to fight that they're all fighting in common, and you know that is the thing that's going to bring them all together. This actually does kind of what Exiles number 1 tried to do, but in a way better fashion, in a way that feels way smoother and way more natural. So, issue number 1 of this new Avengers series, yes, it is a bit all over the place. There are a couple rocky moments here and there, but the purpose of this issue was to introduce both new readers and old readers alike to who these characters are, who's going to be on the team, what have they been dealing with recently, and what's the big threat that they're going to face at the end. And this issue number 1 does that way better than most issue number 1s can do these days. So I was actually honestly kind of impressed with that. Now, I do have a couple concerns for what's coming up in the future, namely the fact that, hey man, as an old school Avengers fan, I always kind of like the idea that the Avengers all live together, they're all a family, they all have those bonding moments amongst each other, and reading this, it kind of gave me that feeling like, yeah, we're probably not going to get that. There's going to be a lot of just, we have to run from one thing onto the next to fight this next thing that's popping up because there's one threat coming up right after another. I got the feeling like that's what this series is going to be. It's going to be a lot of just, quickly, we're traveling the entire world to stop one threat after another. But, you know, that's still fun. That still is a part of the Avengers. So if they're able to keep the action high, keep it fun, keep it entertaining, keep the threat feeling really imminent, like a really big deal that I need to be concerned about, then hey, yeah, I'm still looking forward to that. In fact, in all honesty, that's the main thing that I am excited about for the future. Jason Aaron, if you have been reading his Thor series, you know that dude can come up with some massive world-ending level threats, and he is able to portray these heroes actually having to face that in a way that has you concerned, in a way that makes you go, oh shoot, what is going to happen to this character next? If he is able to do that with more characters other than just Thor, then yeah, this book is going to be a real nail-biter. This is going to be a series in which you are turning every page, hoping to see what the heroes are able to do against the next threat that they have to go up against. Now, those are all the compliments that I have for Jason Aaron, the writer on this book, but the MVP of issue number 1 of the Avengers was Ed McGuinness, Mark Morales, and David Coryell. The artist, the inker, and the colorist all respectively, because holy cow did the three of them come together, assemble if you will, to knock this out of the park. Ed McGuinness, I've always liked his stuff, but in the past couple of years I've gone from liking to loving his art. You can tell he is constantly trying to improve his work, but he's one of those artists who really allow the inker and the colorist to just pop out, and this issue, they do that wonderfully. Like, this is one of the only times in my life I've actually been reading a comic going, that's some damn good coloring. I was reading this on Comixology, and on Comixology, for anybody who doesn't know, you're not turning page by page, you have guided view. So you can actually go from like word bubble to word bubble, you can go from panel to panel, and there's this one moment in which you see the dead Celestial floating in the river, and it starts, just really close zoom up, on a word bubble, and then you click next, and then it expands out, and you see that thing just floating in the river, and I just went, like, just the scale of it, the way that Ed McGuinness was able to capture that feeling of how freaking big this thing was, of how dramatic it looked for it to be dead floating right next to New York, but also the inker and the colors, they were able to make it pop right off the page in your face. And that's not the only panel I can pull up like that. I mean, the big reveal of the villains at the end of this is like, holy cow, the colors and the ink and the art all come together to make them look really intimidating. But there's also a moment in there of Captain Marvel charging into battle, like flying through space. I went, that's some of the best flying through space action I have seen in a comic book. These three guys are able to work together to pull off amazing panels in this issue. And you guys know me, I always like to compliment the writing first on a book. If the writing is not good, then nothing else really matters on a book to me. But damn man, even if the writing wasn't good on this, this is an issue picking up just to look at it. It is a gorgeous first issue. However, I will say one small, I'm not even gonna really say critique, more just like a nitpick with the art, is that this book opens up with a flashback to the Avengers of 10,000 BC when they were first having to fight whatever this big threat is that we run into at the end of this issue, when they had to fight it off the first time around. And yes, it still looks good. It still looks great. But I kind of wish that they had gotten a different artist in there, because I feel like if you're flashing back to 10,000 BC, it would be kind of cool if you could create a totally different tone with that. I feel like if you had gotten an artist in there like Esad Ribic or someone like that to just have a complete contrast from 10,000 years ago and today, it would have created well, I already used the word. It would have created a really great contrast between the time periods. But also, Ed McGuinness, he is an amazing artist, but he does take a little while. It's understandable. He puts the work in. I understand why his stuff, often does get delayed. But if he only had to draw, say, half of an issue, and then all the 10,000 BC stuff was being drawn by another artist, I think that they could put these issues out a whole lot faster. That's just my thoughts, but again, they are still able to make this look good. As I said, it's not really a critique, just a small, tiny nitpick. I think it would have been cool if they had tried something like that, but they didn't, but it still looks cool. But that is it. Those are my thoughts on Avengers issue number 1 by Jason Aaron, Ed McGuinness, Mark Morales, and David Coriel. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. And if you want to see some of the other Avengers shows that we have done recently, I will be linking you to them at the end of this episode. But if you want to help support this channel and get yourself something cool at the same time, I will put a link in the comments down below of where you can find on Amazon one of my favorite old Avengers stories. If you go and buy that or anything else at all on Amazon, as long as you start by going through that link, we get a small cut of the profits. It's a great way to help support this channel and get yourself something cool at the same time. But if you don't want to do that, but you still want to support this channel, hey man, just share these videos around the web. Follow us on Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr at Professor Thorgy. It's great, it's free, doesn't cost you anything, and it helps this channel a lot. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come back next time. Bye.